Susan and I recently returned from a trip to Washington, D.C. and Boston. If you follow us on social media, you saw a bunch of photos. We had a great time, ate delicious food, and had the opportunity to be spectators at 2 Major League Baseball games. We also visited numerous sites related to the history of our nation. The most memorable was Arlington National Cemetery, where approximately 400,000 veterans are buried. Service members from every one of America's major wars, from the Revolutionary War to today's conflicts, are interred at Arlington. The cemetery encompasses 639 acres. As we stood looking over row upon row upon row of grave markers, the word most prominent in my mind was the word sacrifice. It's easy to look at thousands of white rectangular marble markers and be overwhelmed by the sheer volume. It was a sobering experience. What we must not lose sight of is the fact that each individual marker represents an ultimate sacrifice. An historical publication reports the first martyr to the cause of American liberty was Major General Joseph Warren, a well-known political orator, physician, and president of the Provincial Congress of Massachusetts. Shot in the face at close range at Bunker Hill, Warren was at once transformed into a national hero. His death, though shockingly violent, was not unlike tens of thousands of others. There's so many examples of sacrifice in our history. I think of a woman like Harriet Tubman. Because of the cruelty of her various masters, she desired to somehow escape from bondage from a very early age and free others as well. She would later recall, "I had seen their tears and sighs. I had heard their groans and would give every drop of blood in my veins to free them." As she was doing errands, an overseer tried to stop a runaway slave by throwing a 2-pound weight at him. He hit Tubman instead, who was standing nearby the runaway, and caused her skull to crack, which affected her health for the rest of her life, often in the form of seizures. And so after escaping slavery, she returned to Maryland in 1850 as an Underground Railroad conductor. She chose to do so after hearing her niece was soon to be auctioned off. Putting her life on the line, she would go on to rescue over 70 slaves until the outbreak of the Civil War, and did not fail in a single rescue. It was during this time she acquired the nickname Moses. Though the number of killed and wounded in the Civil War is not known precisely, most sources agree that the total number killed was between 640,000 and 700,000. Then there's a heartbreaking story of Jim Elliott and his example of a missionary sacrifice. Jim is credited with making the statement, "He is no fool who gives what he cannot keep to gain what he cannot lose." Some men and women have a hunger and deep passion for the lost in remote places in the world. Jim Elliott had this passion. His calling was for the lost tribes of the Ecuador jungles. God lays a path to bring the gospel to those he loves. However, sometimes things do not go as planned, but God's plan is bigger. We may not understand the ways or the whys, but we can rest assured that God knows what he is doing. The story of Jim Elliott is that he was in a first contact situation with the Auca tribe. The reaction was violent in that they took the lives of Jim Elliott and his team. His sacrifice is certainly not in vain. Jim Elliott's life and death influenced people to spread the gospel. God used his death to bring salvation to many Auca and inspiration to thousands of believers worldwide. Consider others over the centuries who have died and given the ultimate sacrifice for the cause of Christ. The New Testament gives us numerous examples. In the apostolic age, we find John the Baptist and Stephen, James, Peter, James the brother of Jesus, Paul, Andrew, Matthew, Philip, Thomas, Jude, Mark, Timothy, and Philemon, and so many more. You can probably anticipate my next thought. Jesus' death at Calvary to atone for the sins of mankind was indeed the greatest act of sacrifice in the world. I recently had an opportunity to have a gospel conversation with Julius. Julius is a sporadic church attender and a faith practice that elevates works over all else and makes them necessary for salvation. We had a discussion about Jesus' ultimate sacrifice and what he accomplished on the cross. We talked about the reconciliation of God and man through Christ's death and resurrection, how he could be our only substitute, the one who could take our place. With a personal example, we're able to talk about the fact that the only way for us to be saved is for someone to rescue us. Jesus did exactly that through his death and resurrection. What Jesus accomplished on the cross was something that Julian had never considered. He responded by committing his life to Jesus. He heard the good news of the gospel for the very first time and was set free. Who in your life needs to hear the good news today?